My dear friends, welcome to another story that will stay in your heart long after it ends. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a hidden life, a secret buried in time, waiting to be uncovered. The story begins in a small, quiet village, a place where time seemed to move slower than in the rest of the world. The air was always filled with the fragrance of freshly baked bread from the local bakery. The sound of children's laughter echoed in the narrow streets, and the evenings were painted with the golden glow of lamps flickering through old wooden windows. At the very edge of this village stood a house, our house, a house that had seen generations grow, struggle, and celebrate. It was a house of memories. Its white walls were faded, cracked at the corners, and its wooden balcony creaked when the wind blew too hard. To outsiders, it was just another old home. But for us, it was a treasure chest of countless stories. And at the heart of this home was Grandma. She wasn't just the eldest in the family. She was its foundation. Every morning, before the first rays of the sun kissed the fields, she would already be awake. The smell of her tea, strong, with just the right touch of cardamom, would drift through the hallways. Her laughter, though soft, filled every corner of the house with warmth. Her hands, though wrinkled and worn, carried a strength that spoke of years of love, sacrifice, and survival. To us, Grandma was perfect. She had an answer for everything, a story for every question, a prayer for every pain. And yet, there was something about her we never truly understood. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would sit by the window, staring far into the distance, her eyes clouded with thoughts. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was asleep, I could hear her footsteps, soft, careful, almost secretive, as if she were walking with memories she didn't want anyone else to hear. We never asked her about it, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of fear of breaking the magic of who she was. But everything changed one summer evening. That day, the rain had come suddenly, heavy, wild, and relentless. The whole family had gathered in the living room, sipping tea, talking about small things. Laughter echoed against the sound of raindrops beating against the old windows. Grandma sat in her favorite chair, knitting quietly, smiling every now and then at our chatter. When the rain finally slowed, she asked me to help her clean the attic. "It's been a long time, child. There are things up there that need care," she said. The attic of our house was a world of its own. Dust floated like mist in the dim light. Boxes stacked high, filled with things from years gone by. Old photographs, torn blankets, books whose pages had yellowed with age. Every object seemed to whisper stories of its own. And then, I saw it, a trunk, wooden, heavy, with rusted metal edges. It looked older than anything else in that attic. As I tried to move it, the wooden base made a hollow sound. My heart skipped a beat. Something was hidden. I leaned closer, wiped away the dust, and noticed a false bottom. My fingers trembled as I carefully lifted it, and there, lying silently, as if it had been waiting for me all these years, was a diary. Not just any diary, a leather-bound, fragile, and locked diary. The lock, however, was broken. Rust had eaten it away, leaving the pages free, yet untouched. I picked it up. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought Grandma might hear it downstairs. The diary felt heavy, not in weight, but in presence, like it carried more than just words. I sat down in the dusty attic, placed the diary on my lap, and slowly opened it. The smell of old paper hit me, that scent of forgotten ink and trapped time. On the very first page, written in neat cursive, was Grandma's name. Beneath it, a sentence that froze my breath. To the one I could never forget, even when the world forced me to. I blinked, reading it again and again. What did it mean? Who was she writing to? My chest tightened with questions. Grandma had always told us Grandpa was her only love, her only companion. She spoke of him with pride, with tenderness. But this was different. This was not a message to Grandpa. This was to someone else, someone we had never heard of. I turned the page, and at first it seemed ordinary. Notes about her day, her thoughts about the garden, her worries about the harvest. But hidden between the lines were strange details. Dates, names, places that didn't belong, like pieces of a puzzle scattered in the middle of her life. And then I read a line that sent a shiver down my spine. If anyone ever finds this, they will finally know the truth of the sacrifice I made. The attic suddenly felt colder. The rain outside had stopped, but thunder rumbled in the distance. I could hear my own heartbeat, echoing louder than the silence around me. Just as I was about to turn another page, Grandma's voice called from downstairs. "Child, are you still up there? Dinner's getting cold." I jumped, almost dropping the diary. My hands shook as I quickly closed it, slid it back into the trunk, and replaced the false bottom. I brushed off the dust and stood frozen for a moment, trying to calm the storm inside me. As I made my way down the attic stairs, I saw her waiting at the bottom, her face, her smile. It was the same as always. Gentle, loving, calm. And yet, now I looked at her differently. Did she know I had found it? Could she read it in my eyes? Did her smile hide the weight of the words I had just read? I sat with the family at dinner, but the food tasted like nothing. My mind was still in that attic, my thoughts still on that diary, my heart still repeating the words I had read. To the one I could never forget, the sacrifice I made. And as I glanced at Grandma across the table, watching her laugh softly at a cousin's joke, I asked myself the question that would haunt me until the very end of this story. Do we ever really know the ones we love? Or do they all carry secrets buried deep in their hearts, waiting for the right moment, or the wrong one, to be uncovered? This was only the beginning. Stay with me for the next part of this story, where the diary begins to reveal its secret. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what's hidden in Grandma's diary is something no one in the family could have ever imagined. The night after I first found the diary, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the tick-tock of the old wall clock, each second dragging heavier than the last. The words I had read looped endlessly in my mind. To the one I could never forget, even when the world forced me to. If anyone ever finds this, they will finally know the truth of the sacrifice I made. The house was silent. My siblings were asleep. My parents had gone to bed. But I could hear faint noises, the soft creak of floorboards, the gentle clink of a teacup in the kitchen. I realized it was Grandma, awake at this late hour. Was she checking the attic? Did she somehow know I had touched her diary? I pulled my blanket over my head, my heart pounding, until I drifted into restless dreams, filled with shadows of old pages and whispers of forgotten names. The next morning, the sun spilled through the curtains, painting the room gold. But instead of the usual comfort it brought, it felt almost too bright, like it was exposing something that should have stayed hidden. I went downstairs. Grandma was in the kitchen, humming softly as she kneaded dough. She looked the same, calm, smiling. But I felt the weight of what I knew pressing down on me. She glanced at me and said, "Did you sleep well, child?" I hesitated. "Yes, Grandma." I lied. Her eyes lingered on me for a second longer than usual, as if she could see through the lie. Then she smiled and went back to her dough. That day passed in a blur, but the pull of the diary grew stronger. With each passing hour, by evening I couldn't resist anymore. I climbed back into the attic, carefully this time, making sure no one saw me. The air smelled of dust and wood, the way only attics do. I lifted the false bottom again and pulled out the diary. My hands trembled as I opened it where I had left off. The next page began innocently. About the weather, about a neighbor who had visited, about chores. But then, as I read further, the words shifted. There was a name, Armin. It appeared, suddenly, woven into her sentences. Today I passed by the old marketplace. It reminded me of Arman. I wonder if he still remembers the promises we made by the riverside. My chest tightened. Arman. Who was Arman? I flipped to the next entry. Sometimes I feel guilty, as though I betrayed him, but I had no choice. The world was not kind, and my family needed me more than my heart did. Yet, at night, I still dream of Armin's eyes, and it feels like he's calling me back. I froze. These weren't the words of the grandma I knew, the one who always spoke of Grandpa as her great love, her only love. This was another version of her, someone younger, torn, and heartbreakingly human. The diary continued with more names, more details. There were mentions of places I had never heard of. The stone bridge, the riverside bench, the old mango grove. They were written almost like secret codes, things only she and Armin would understand. Then, one entry shook me completely. I had to choose between love and duty. I chose duty. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I killed a part of myself that day. I felt goosebumps on my skin. My throat went dry. I wanted to keep reading, to know more, but suddenly the attic floor creaked loudly beneath me. My heart jumped. I thought Grandma was coming. The next evening, I couldn't resist. My hands itched to touch that diary again, to peel away more of the layers of Grandma's hidden life. The attic had become a forbidden place, yet it pulled me back like a magnet. I waited until everyone was busy. Grandma was outside in the garden, humming to herself as she watered the plants. My parents were visiting neighbors. The house was quiet, the perfect moment. I crept into the attic, my heart beating so loud it echoed in my ears. Dust rose as I lifted the trunk lid, and there it was again, the diary. The leather felt colder this time, as if it knew the weight of what it carried. I opened to where I had stopped, the page that ended with her whispering Armin's name. And then the next entry began, not with her usual soft notes, but with a memory so vivid, it pulled me into her world. The year was 1952. The monsoon had just arrived, and the rivers swelled with new life. I was 17, young, full of dreams, yet bound by the invisible chains of tradition. My days were filled with chores, fetching water, tending the animals, learning the endless duties of a wife I had not yet become. And yet, amidst that routine, fate brought me to him, to Armin. As I read, I could almost see it. A younger version of Grandma, her hair dark, her eyes bright, her spirit unbroken. The village was alive with the colors of the season. Children splashed in puddles. Farmers guided their plows through the muddy fields. Women laughed as they spread wet clothes on lines under fleeting sunshine. And there, by the riverbank, she first saw him. He was not from their village. He was taller than most men she knew, his skin tanned by the sun, his shirt simple but clean. He carried books under his arm, a rare sight in those days. His smile was easy, but his eyes, they held a depth, a hunger for something more than what the world had given him. She wrote about how their eyes met that first day, how a strange current passed between them, strong enough to make her lower her gaze and rush away, her heart racing faster than her footsteps. But fate is rarely satisfied with just one meeting. The diary described their second encounter at the marketplace, where stalls overflowed with spices, fabrics, and the noise of bargaining voices. She had gone with her mother to buy lentils, her head covered with a dupatta, her eyes lowered as tradition demanded. But when her mother paused at a stall, she looked up, and there he was again, Arman, leaning casually against a wooden post, holding a book, pretending to read while his eyes searched the crowd. And when they met hers, his lips curved into the faintest smile. Not bold, not disrespectful, just a smile that said, "I see you. I know you see me." Her hand trembled so much, she dropped the small basket she was holding. He stepped forward instinctively, picked it up, and handed it back to her without a word. But in that silent exchange, something passed between them, something stronger than spoken language. The entries unfolded like scenes from a secret film. She began noticing him everywhere, in the fields, at the well, by the old mango grove, where the village children played, always at a distance, always respectful, but always present. And each time, her heart beat faster, carrying her into nights where sleep refused to come. "It frightened me," she wrote, "because I knew what love meant for girls like me. Love was not a choice. It was a burden, a rebellion, a sin. And yet, the more I tried to avoid him, the more fate placed him in my path. Could destiny be so cruel, to show me a dream I was never meant to live?" I paused, my throat dry. I had never imagined Grandma as a girl with a beating heart, with stolen glances and whispered fears. To me, she was always Grandma, strong, gentle, unshakable. But here, she was just like me, young, confused, afraid of her own feelings. Turn the page. There was a description of the day they first spoke. It was by the riverside. She had gone alone to wash clothes, the water cool against her hands. She thought she was alone, but then she heard footsteps. She turned, and there he was, standing a few feet away. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said softly. "I only came here to read." She wanted to walk away, but something held her still. Perhaps the gentleness in his tone, perhaps the honesty in his eyes. You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Neither should you," he replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. Her cheeks burned. She turned back to the water, scrubbing the clothes with trembling hands. But he didn't leave. He sat a few steps away, opened his book, and began to read aloud. Not to her, not to himself, but to the river, as if the words belonged to the world. And though she pretended not to listen, every syllable sank into her soul. As I read those lines, I realized this wasn't just infatuation. This was a meeting of souls, two young people who found in each other what they couldn't express to anyone else. The diary described many such meetings after that, always by chance, always brief, always surrounded by the fear of being seen. Yet in those stolen moments, they built a world of their own. He told her about his dreams, to study, to travel beyond the village, to make something of himself. She told him about her fears, her duties, the heavy expectations of her family. He listened, not judging, just listening, the way no one else ever had. And then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and the river reflected shades of fire and gold, he turned to her and said, "One day, I'll ask your family for your hand. Not today, not tomorrow, but when I'm ready. Until then, promise me you'll wait." Her heart pounded. The world around her seemed to disappear. She didn't answer with words. She couldn't. But the way her eyes lingered on his, the way her breath caught in her throat, was answer enough. From that day forward, they weren't just two strangers meeting in secret. They were bound by an unspoken promise. The entry ended with a sentence that sent chills down my spine. If only I had known how cruel time can be, I would have held his hand that day and never let go. I closed the diary slowly, my hands trembling. The attic felt different now. Not just a place of dust and shadows, but a theater where the ghosts of my grandma's youth still lived, playing out scenes of love and longing. For the first time in my life, I saw her not just as grandma, but as a young girl who had once loved fiercely, dangerously, beautifully, and yet I knew this was only the beginning of her story with Armin. The next diary entry began weeks later. The handwriting was still neat, but there were faint smudges, as though tears had fallen on the page while she wrote. The days grew longer, and so did the weight in my heart. Every morning I woke to the duties of a daughter, but every evening my soul yearned for the riverside, for the shadow of the mango trees, for his voice that made the world seem less cruel. I leaned closer, as if her words were being whispered into my ears, across time. She described the secret rhythm they fell into. Every few days, when chores allowed, she would find herself at the riverside, sometimes with an excuse to wash clothes, sometimes to collect firewood, sometimes with no excuse at all, only the hunger to see him. And he was always there, as though he had been waiting since the moment she last left. Their conversations stretched like threads of sunlight through clouds. He told her about books he had read, poems that spoke of longing, stories of courage, philosophies of freedom. She confessed her fears, her secret dreams, the small joys she dared not share with anyone else. He laughed with her. He listened when she cried. He made her believe, for the first time, that her thoughts mattered. It was as if the world had finally seen me, she wrote. Not as a daughter, not as a burden, not as a bride in waiting, but as myself. Armin saw me, but shadows do not stay hidden for long. The diary darkened as she described the first signs of suspicion. Her mother began asking why it took her so long to fetch water. A neighbor commented that she had seen her wandering near the fields alone. Even her younger brother teased, saying, "You smile too much these days. Who are you thinking about?" And though they were said half in jest, each word tightened the knot of fear around her heart, because in her world, a girl's honor was not her own. It was the family's. One whisper, one glance, could destroy everything. Yet love has a way of growing even in the harshest soil. One evening, as monsoon clouds gathered again, she met Armin under the old mango grove. The air smelled of wet earth and rain-soaked leaves. He stood waiting, his shirt damp, his hair falling into his eyes. "You're late," he said softly. "I had to help Mother," she replied, brushing raindrops from her dupatta. He smiled, relief flooding his face just from her presence. "Every minute without you feels like a day." Her cheeks warmed, but before she could answer, thunder cracked above them. She flinched, and instinctively, he reached out, his hand brushing hers. The diary's ink swirled, as if her hand had trembled while writing. In that moment, time stopped. His fingers touched mine, just for a breath, just for a heartbeat, and it felt as if the earth itself had shifted beneath us. I should have pulled away. I should have remembered the eyes of the village, the chains of my family, but I didn't. For that one stolen second, I let myself belong to him. I paused, my own breath shaky. I could almost see them, the rain falling, the thunder rolling, their hands brushing like forbidden fire. And yet, the entry did not end in joy. It ended with fear. We heard footsteps, distant, but enough to shatter the moment. I pulled away, my heart in my throat. He whispered, "Don't be afraid. One day we will not need to hide." But I knew, even then, that day might never come. The next entries grew shorter, hurried, as though she had less time to write or more to hide. She wrote of her father's growing sternness, his reminders that she was of age, that families had begun asking about her. She wrote of her mother's watchful eyes, her sudden insistence that she stay indoors more, and she wrote of the nights she wept quietly, clutching her pillow, whispering Armin's name into the dark. One entry struck me hardest. Armin spoke of leaving. He said the city held opportunities, that he could study, work, build a future worthy of us. He promised he would return, stronger, ready to ask for my hand. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold his words like a flame against the cold, but in my heart, I feared. What if the world took him away forever? I closed my eyes, picturing it. A young man with dreams too big for the village. A young woman chained to duties too heavy for her heart. Both standing at the edge of a love that could never be spoken aloud. The diary pages trembled in my hands as I read on. Their last meeting before his departure was by the riverside. The sky was painted with crimson and gold, the air heavy with the scent of rain. He took her hand, truly this time, not by accident. His grip was firm, desperate. "Promise me," he said, his voice breaking. "Promise me you'll wait, no matter what they say, no matter who comes. Wait for me." Her tears blurred her vision. She wanted to say yes, to vow eternity, but the chains of fear, of duty, of family silenced her lips. Instead, she nodded, unable to trust her voice. And then, with one last lingering look, he turned and walked away. She wrote, "I watched him disappear into the distance, carrying my heart with him, and as the shadows swallowed him, I felt a part of me break, because I knew the world would never let me keep my promise." I stopped reading. My chest ached. My eyes burned. I had never known this side of Grandma, the girl who had once loved so fiercely, so helplessly, and yet, as powerful as this love was, I knew it was only the beginning of the storm, because the next pages hinted at something darker, whispers of suitors chosen by her family, of decisions made without her, of sacrifices looming like thunderclouds. The next diary pages were filled with hurried strokes. The ink pressed hard, as though her hand had been trembling with every word. After Arman left, the world closed in on me. Days felt like years. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with silence, broken only by the ache in my chest. I counted the hours, the seasons, the festivals that passed, waiting for a letter, a message, a sign, but nothing came. Her words bled sorrow, and while I waited, my family planned. They spoke in whispers, but the walls in our house were thin, and a daughter's ears are always sharp when her fate is being decided. One evening, as I passed by the veranda, I heard my father's voice, stern, resolved. "She is of age. We cannot wait any longer. It is time." The ink blurred. As if her tears had fallen onto the page, I froze. My body went cold. I wanted to scream that my heart already belonged to someone, that my soul was already promised. But daughters in our world are not asked what they want. They are told. She described the following days with painful clarity. The house buzzed with visits from distant relatives, neighbors bringing trays of sweets, women whispering in corners. Every smile, every compliment was a nail in the coffin of her freedom. Her mother fussed over her clothes, her hair, her posture. Her father watched her with a pride that felt like chains. And through it all, her younger siblings giggled, too young to understand the heaviness in her silence. I felt like a doll being polished, dressed, displayed. Not a person, not a soul with dreams of her own. Then came the suitor. She wrote about the day he arrived. He was older than me. His voice was deep, his manners careful. He wore fine clothes, spoke of business, respectability, stability. He looked at me as though I were already his possession, not a person he wished to know. My father's eyes shone with approval. My mother's smile trembled with relief, and I felt my heart collapsing within me. I could almost see it, my grandmother, still so young, sitting quietly with lowered eyes, while strangers judged her like a commodity, and all the while, Armin's face burned in her mind. The boy by the riverside, the hand that had once held hers, the voice that had promised, "One day we will not need to hide," but there was no letter, no message, no sign of him. Did he forget me? Did the city swallow him? Did I mean so little? She wrote in one desperate entry. Her words cracked with pain, and yet I knew the truth. Even if he returned, what could he do? My father's decision was law. My mother's silence was compliance. And I was trapped. I could not fight them all. To fight would be to shame them, to destroy the family's honor. And a daughter cannot live if she destroys the name of her house. The night before her engagement, she sneaked away to the riverside. One last time, I waited under the mango trees. Long after the moon rose, long after the crickets grew tired of singing, I waited for him, prayed for him, begged for him, but he never came. The river flowed, the stars dimmed, and I was left alone, with nothing but the echo of his promise. When she returned home, her fate was sealed. Her family celebrated. Drums beat, sweets were distributed. Women sang songs of marriage and fortune. But inside her chest, she wrote, her heart was being buried alive. I smiled when they asked me to smile. I bowed when they asked me to bow. But within me, a scream clawed against my ribs. I wanted to run, to break free, to find him, to hold his hand and never let go. But instead, I sat still, silent, obedient, because that was what daughters were trained to do. Her engagement was announced the next day, and that night she wrote the line that shattered me. In choosing their pride, I killed my love. In choosing their honor, I buried myself. I closed the diary for a moment, pressing it against my chest. I had always seen Grandma as a figure of strength, of serenity, of patience. But here she was, a young girl, broken, suffocated, sacrificed at the altar of duty. And yet, I sensed there was still more, because she had written about the sacrifice I made in the beginning. And this unbearable heartbreak, felt like only the first of many sacrifices. The next page confirmed it. I thought the story ended there, with my engagement, my silence, my obedience. But fate was not so merciful. For even as I was bound to another, Amen returned. Her words stopped there, mid-sentence, the ink trailing off, as though her hand had trembled too much to finish. My heart pounded. Amen had come back. He had returned, only to find her already promised to another. What happened then? Did they meet? Did they fight for each other? Did she reject him to protect her family? The pages ahead would tell me, but already my chest ached with the weight of her choices. It was the day after her engagement ceremony. The house still carried the scent of sweets and flowers. Voices of relatives lingered, full of congratulations, laughter, and songs. But inside her chest, she wrote, there was only silence, like a graveyard where something precious had been buried. And then, as dusk fell, she heard the sound, a pebble striking her window. Her hands trembled as she moved to the wooden shutters, slowly opening them. And there, half hidden by shadows, stood Armin. His clothes were worn from travel, his face tired, but his eyes burned with the same fire she had seen by the riverside. He had come back. My breath caught, my knees weakened. I wanted to scream with joy, to cry with relief, to run into his arms, but the ring on my finger felt like a chain pulling me down. I whispered his name, and it felt like a sin. She slipped quietly out of her room, avoiding the noise of relatives still gathered. Her heart pounded with every step as she crept through the courtyard, past the kitchen where her mother hummed, past the veranda where her father sat with guests. Every corner was a danger, every shadow a witness, but somehow she made it out. The night air was cool against her skin as she ran to the grove near the river, their place. And there he was, waiting. When she saw him clearly for the first time, she almost collapsed. He looked thinner, older, worn by the city. His hands were rougher, his clothes dusty, but his eyes, they still carried me, still knew me, still claimed me as theirs. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I came back for you." Her lips quivered. "You're too late." "What do you mean?" he asked. Reaching for her hands, she pulled back, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They've promised me to another. Yesterday. The celebrations are still going on in my house." His face fell, as though the ground had been ripped from beneath him. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be. You said you would wait." "I did wait," she cried. "I waited every day, every night, every moment. But you never came, Armin. You left me with nothing but silence." "I was working," he said desperately. "I was building something. For us. I thought if I could return with enough, they would accept me. I thought love was enough to hold us together." She shook her head, sobs choking her. "Love is never enough for them. For my father, honor is more precious than my happiness. For my mother, silence is safer than rebellion. They chose my life before I even knew what living was." He dropped to his knees, clutching her hands. "Then run away with me, tonight, right now. Leave all of this behind. What is honor if it means losing your soul? What is duty if it means killing your heart? Come with me." Her body shook violently at his words. For a moment, she imagined it. The two of them running into the night, hand in hand, never looking back. A life of freedom, even if it meant poverty, even if it meant exile. But then she saw her father's face, stern and unyielding. Her mother's eyes, lined with silent fear. Her siblings, too young to understand the ruin her choices could bring. Upon them, she saw her family being shamed, ridiculed, cast out. She saw her mother breaking under the whispers of the village, her father bowing under dishonor, and she knew she could not do it. "I loved him more than my own breath," she wrote, "but I loved my family's dignity more than myself, and so I chose silence. I chose sacrifice. I chose to kill my happiness so theirs could survive." Her hand slipped from his. "I can't," she whispered. He stared at her, broken. "You mean you won't?" Her tears fell harder. "If I go, my family dies. If I stay, I die. Either way, someone must be buried. I choose myself." He stood slowly, his face pale, his chest heaving. "So this is the end," he said bitterly. "We had a love that could have moved mountains, but you let walls stop us." Her lips trembled. "No, we had a love that was true, but the world was too cruel to let it live." They stood in silence for what felt like eternity, the river rushing between them, the night pressing down, the stars cold and distant. Finally, he reached into his pocket. From it, he pulled a small pendant, simple but worn with care. "I bought this for you," he said softly. "Every coin I earned, every step I took, I thought of you. I wanted to return with something that said you were mine, that I was yours. But now," he placed it gently in her hand, "now it is just a memory of what could have been." Her tears blurred everything. She wanted to throw herself at him, to beg him not to leave, to hold him until the sun rose. But her legs would not move. Her lips would not open. She let him walk away, I watched him disappear into the shadows again, she wrote, but this time, he did not carry my heart with him. I had buried it myself, under duty, under fear, under sacrifice. That night, the girl named Mayher died. Only Grandma was left. Obedient, silent, bound. I sat frozen, the diary heavy in my hands. My chest hurt as if the grief had been passed down to me. This was the sacrifice she had spoken of. Not just losing the love of her life, but choosing to lose it, to kill it with her own hands, to bury her happiness for the sake of her family's honor. And yet, I felt there was still more hidden in these pages, because Grandma had not written this diary only to mourn her lost love. She had written it to leave behind a truth that no one had ever known. Stay with me for part 4, where the diary reveals the aftermath, the marriage she never wanted, the life she built on silence, and the secret she carried until the day I found these pages. Like, share, and subscribe, because the pain you've felt so far is only the beginning of the truth she left behind. The next pages of the diary were heavier, as if the ink itself had absorbed years of silence. Each word bled sorrow, but also carried a quiet resilience, the kind that only comes when a soul has accepted its cage. After Armin walked away into the shadows, my life was no longer my own. The house bustled with wedding preparations, and though every step echoed like a death march inside me, I smiled when told to smile, bowed when told to bow, and agreed when told to agree. In those days, my hands moved like a puppet's, my voice answered like an echo, and my eyes learned to look at the floor, so no one would notice the storm raging behind them. The man chosen for me was respected, stable, admired by my fathers, peers. He was everything a family could want for their daughter, except what my heart wanted for myself. On the day of the wedding, the courtyard was filled with lights and flowers, the sound of laughter, and drums vibrating through the night. Women sang songs about love and prosperity, but to me, every word felt like a curse. The scent of jasmine and rose petals filled the air, yet I could only smell the faint ghost of the river where I had last seen him. I remember sitting there, dressed in red, my face painted with smiles that weren't mine, my body draped in jewels that felt heavier than chains. My mother adjusted my veil with trembling hands, whispering, "Be strong, child. This is your fate now." Her eyes shone with tears she did not dare let fall, because even she, bound by the same walls, had no power to change what had been decided for me, and so I was married. The diary lingered on those first days of marriage, each line steeped in suffocating stillness. My husband was not cruel, nor was he unkind. He was simply distant, pragmatic, a man more devoted to his work and reputation than to affection. He expected obedience, respect, silence. I gave him all of that because I had nothing else left to give. Nights passed where I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Armin still thought of me, if he hated me, if he had found another. The pendant he had given me remained hidden beneath my clothes, pressed against my skin like a secret heartbeat. Time moved slowly in that house. Days became months. Months became years. I learned to cook, to manage, to serve. I became a dutiful wife, a respectable woman, a perfect daughter-in-law. On the outside, I was everything society expected of me. But inside, I was empty, a shell, carrying memories that would not die. My silence became my shield, and my chores became my distractions. The diary described how she bore children, each one filling her arms, but not the void in her chest. I loved them, she wrote, with every ounce of my soul. They were innocent, untainted by the cruel bargains of fate. In their laughter, I found fleeting moments of joy. In their cries, I found purpose. They became my reason to wake each morning, my only anchor in a life that had stolen so much from me. Yet even as I held them close, I could never erase the thought of the love I had lost, the life that might have been. And then came the cruelest twist of all. Years later, as life settled into its numb routine, fate crossed my path with almonds once more. She wrote about the day she saw him again, older now, his shoulders broader, his face marked with lines of struggle. He had made something of himself, just as he had promised. He had wealth, respect, a name people admired, but his eyes still carried the same fire, though dulled by disappointment. He stood across the market road one afternoon, surrounded by people. Yet when our eyes met, the world fell silent. My breath caught. My heart remembered what it had tried so hard to forget. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though nothing had changed, as though we were still two young souls beneath the mango trees. But then his gaze shifted to the children, clinging to my departure, to the sindoor in my hair, to the bangles that marked me as another man's wife. His jaw clenched, his eyes burned, and without a word, he turned away. I wanted to scream, to run after him, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but my feet would not move, my voice would not rise. My children tugged at my hands, calling me, needing me, and so I stayed still, watching him walk away once more, this time forever. That night, she wrote. She cried until her throat burned, muffling her sobs, so no one in the house would hear. She clutched the pendant he had given her, holding it so tightly that its edges cut into her skin. The blood mingled with her tears, sealing the truth in silence once again. As the years passed, I grew older, my face lined with wrinkles, my hair streaked with gray. People saw me as strong, patient, wise. They came to me for advice, for comfort, for stories of the past, but no one ever saw the wound I carried, the love I buried, the sacrifice I made. To them, I was simply grandma, the gentle matriarch of the family. To myself, I was a woman who had died long ago, yet kept breathing for the sake of others. And then, near the end of her writing, she revealed something that made my heart stop. I kept one secret, she wrote, that no one ever knew. My firstborn child was not my husband's. My breath froze. The words blurred before my eyes, my hands trembling. She continued. It happened during those stolen moments, in the final days before my engagement. Armin and I, desperate and afraid, had given ourselves to each other beneath the stars by the riverside. It was not planned, not spoken of, but it was love, pure and undeniable. And from that love, my first child was born. I pressed the diary against my chest, my entire body shaking. The truth had been hidden for decades, buried under silence, duty, and fear. All these years, the family believed her first child was fathered by her husband, but the truth was different. The truth was that Armin lived on, in her blood, in her child, in us. She ended the diary with words that shattered me completely. I never spoke of this, because to reveal it would destroy everything. But I want you, whoever finds this, to know that my sacrifice was not only losing the man I loved. My sacrifice was carrying his memory in silence, raising his child as another man's, burying my truth so deep that even my own heart sometimes forgot. And yet, I regret nothing, because, even in silence, I kept a piece of him alive. When I finally set the diary down, the attic had grown darker, the last strands of sunlight fading into dusk. Dust floated in the air like fragments of memory, shimmering in the dying light. My heart was still racing, my breath uneven, I had entered this attic searching for forgotten belongings, but what I had found was a truth that threatened to change everything I thought I knew about my family. For a long time, I sat in silence, clutching the diary against my chest, as if letting it go would erase the words written within. I could still hear Grandma's voice in my head, trembling yet strong, confessing her truth with the ink of her soul. Every word replayed in my mind, weaving itself into my own heartbeat. But what now? I looked at the door, my mind torn. Should I tell the family? Should I keep her secret buried? Just as she had done all her life, the weight of the choice was suffocating. On one hand, exposing the truth could shatter the foundation of our family's story, unravel relationships, and bring questions that might never be answered. On the other, hiding it meant betraying her final wish, that someone know, that someone remember, that someone carry her voice into the future. I wiped my tears and whispered to myself, "Grandma, what do you want me to do?" The attic remained silent, but in that silence, I felt her presence, warm, steady, urging me to be brave. She had hidden her truth because society left her no choice, but I lived in a different world, a world where love, even forbidden love, could be honored. Maybe her story had found me for a reason. I stood, clutching the diary in both hands, and made my way down the creaking stairs. The living room buzzed with the familiar chaos of family. Children played with toy cars. Aunts and uncles chatted over tea, and my mother sat in the corner, mending a torn sleeve. For a moment, I just stood there, watching them all, realizing that every smile, every laugh, every bond had been shaped by a story they didn't know. A story that had begun with a forbidden love and a sacrifice too heavy to name. My throat tightened. Could I really tell them? Could I be the voice that shattered their illusions of the past? I sat beside my mother, my hands trembling as I placed the diary on her lap. She looked at me, confused, her brows furrowing. "What's this?" "Grandma's diary," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You need to read it." At first, she resisted, brushing it aside as though it were just another relic of an old life. But something in my eyes must have told her it was more. Slowly, she opened the worn cover, her fingers tracing the first lines. As her eyes moved across the words, her face changed. Confusion, disbelief, sorrow, and finally tears. Her hands shook so violently that the pages crinkled beneath them. By the time she reached the end, the diary slipped from her grasp, landing on the floor with a soft thud. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling. The room had fallen silent. Everyone was watching. "What's wrong?" my uncle asked, his voice cautious. My mother could not speak, so I picked up the diary, standing in the center of the room. My hands trembled, my throat burned, but I forced the words out. "Grandma, she loved someone else before the marriage, and her first child was his." The silence that followed was unbearable. Every face turned toward me, eyes wide, jaws in slack. The children stopped playing, sensing the weight in the air. My uncle shook his head. "No, that's not possible. You must have misunderstood." But I held the diary high. I didn't misunderstand. She wrote it herself. These are her words. She carried this secret her whole life. And now, we know. Voices rose, overlapping, denial, anger, confusion. How can this be true? Why would she hide it? What does this mean for us? I watched them all, my chest aching. This was the fear she had lived with all her life, that her truth would destroy the family. And in this moment, it felt like it might. But then, my mother lifted her head, her eyes swollen with tears. Her voice was soft, but steady. She was my mother, and no matter what her past held, it doesn't change that. She looked around. The room, her gaze fierce. She sacrificed everything. For us. She carried her pain so we wouldn't have to. And if this is her truth, then we must honor it, not shame it. Her words cut through the chaos, like light piercing a storm. Slowly, the room calmed. The anger softened into sorrow, the confusion into contemplation. I opened the diary again, reading aloud passages of Grandma's love, her heartbreak, her resilience. With each word, the family's faces shifted. They began to see not a scandal, not a betrayal, but a woman who had loved deeply, suffered silently, and given everything for her children. By the time I finished, the room was filled with tears. My uncle bowed his head, whispering, "I never knew. I never even thought." My cousins clutched each other, their eyes red. The children, too young to understand fully, looked around with wide eyes, sensing the gravity of the moment, and then something extraordinary happened. My mother reached out, taking my hand, then my uncle's. One by one, the family joined hands, forming a circle. We sat there, united not just by blood, but by the truth we now shared. I realized then that the diary had not broken us. It had bound us closer, reminding us that our roots were deeper, more complex, more human than we had ever imagined. Grandma's secret was not a stain. It was a testament to love, to sacrifice, to the quiet strength of women who carry this world on their shoulders. That night, we lit a candle in her memory, placing it beside the diary on the table. The flame flickered gently, casting shadows on the walls, as if she were there among us, smiling through the light. As I stared at the flame, I felt her presence again, not in sorrow this time, but in peace. Her story was no longer hidden. It was alive, breathing through us, carried forward into the future. And I made a silent vow, I will tell this story to my children, to their children, to anyone who will listen. Because behind every gentle smile of a grandmother, behind every wrinkled hand and tired eye, there may lie a story of love, sacrifice, and secrets that shaped generations. The diary had given me more than just the truth. It had given me her heart, and I would never let it be forgotten.